Life has a strange way of teaching us lessons we never asked for. Some lessons come gently, wrapped in small victories and quiet moments. Others, though, they come like a storm, tearing through everything you thought was solid, leaving you with nothing but questions, doubts, and pain. The story I'm about to share with you is one of those storms. It is not just about money or family disputes. It is about trust, betrayal, and the kind of heartbreak that shakes you to your very core. It involves me, my wife, and my daughter who, at the time, was only 17 years old. Now, before I dive in, let me tell you something about my daughter. She is one of the brightest, most compassionate souls I know. From the day she was born, she brought light into my life in ways I didn't think were possible. She's smart, she's funny, and most importantly, she has a heart that always puts others before herself. Over the years, she has grown into a young woman I am incredibly proud of. She studies hard, she treats people with kindness, and she has a sense of responsibility that is rare for someone her age. Unlike many teenagers who spend every dollar they get on clothes, gadgets, or going out with friends, my daughter decided to do something different. She saved. She worked part-time jobs after school and during summer breaks. Babysitting, tutoring younger kids, helping out at a local cafe, she did it all. And while she did enjoy small treats here and there, most of the money went straight into savings. Over time, bit by bit, that savings grew into something significant. When I eventually learned how much she had saved, I was floored. $3,000. For a teenager, that is no small amount. For many adults, that's a decent safety net or a down payment on something important. I couldn't believe it at first, so I asked her, half jokingly, "What are you planning to do with all this money? Are you secretly running your own business or something?" For setting it to naughty, Stape with said. She just smiled in that way, only she could, and said, "Dad, you'll find out soon enough." I thought maybe she was saving for college, maybe for a car, or perhaps just to feel secure. Whatever it was, I was proud of her. But here's where the storm begins. My wife, her mother, was not always the most responsible when it came to money. Don't get me wrong, she had her good qualities. She could be loving, supportive, and caring when she wanted to be. But when it came to finances, she had habits that made me uneasy. Impulse shopping, unnecessary luxuries, and sometimes even dipping into savings without telling me. I always tried to keep the peace. Marriage, after all, requires compromise. And for the most part, I managed to overlook it, thinking, she'll grow out of it. It's just a phase. We'll be okay. But deep down, I knew these patterns were dangerous. The breaking point came one ordinary afternoon. My daughter had just come home from school, looking especially cheerful. She told me she had something planned, something that would surprise me. I didn't press her for details. I wanted her to enjoy keeping her little secret. Later that evening, while I was working in my study, she came in and gave me a hug. She whispered, "Dad, I've been saving all this money for you. I wanted to buy you something special because you've always been there for me." In the savor dis to many, at that moment, my heart nearly burst. I had to fight back tears. Imagine hearing that from your teenage daughter, 17 years old, with her whole world ahead of her. Yet she chose to think of me first. It was one of those rare moments that make all the struggles of parenthood worth it. I hugged her back and told her how much I loved her. I also told her she didn't need to spend a dime on me, because her love and respect were the greatest gifts I could ever ask for. But she insisted. She wanted to do something meaningful for me. What I didn't know then was that this beautiful gesture would be ruined in the most heartbreaking way possible. A few days later, I noticed something odd. My daughter seemed upset, distracted even. I asked her what was wrong, but she brushed it off with the usual, "I'm fine, Dad." Still, I could tell something was bothering her. Parents have a way of sensing these things, you know? That evening, I overheard a heated conversation between her and my wife. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough to piece things together. My daughter's voice was filled with anger and frustration as she said, "Mom, how could you? That money wasn't yours." My heart stopped. I confronted my wife later that night, and that's when the truth came crashing down. She had taken the money. All of it. Every last dollar of the $3,000 my daughter had worked so hard to save. Her explanation? She said she needed it. She claimed it was for household expenses, but I knew better. I had seen the new designer bag she bought just days earlier, the one she swore was on sale and practically free. I felt a wave of anger unlike anything I had experienced before, not just because of the money itself, but because of what it represented. My daughter's sacrifice, her love, her years of hard work all stolen just like that. When I asked my wife how she could do such a thing, she shrugged it off. "It's just money," she said. "She's young. She'll make more. Just money." Those two words cut deeper than any knife. To her, maybe it was just money. But to my daughter, it was a symbol of everything she had been working toward. It was her way of showing love, gratitude, and independence. I couldn't stand by and let that betrayal go unanswered. So, I sat my daughter down, and I told her the truth. I didn't sugarcoat it. I explained that her mother had taken the money, and that I was deeply sorry for what had happened. I promised her I would make it right. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she asked me one simple question. "Why, Dad? Why would she do this to me?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. That night, I made a decision. If my wife thought she could take advantage of our daughter's kindness without consequences, she was wrong. I began planning how to make things right, not just financially, but emotionally as well. My daughter needed to know that her sacrifices meant something, that her efforts were not in vain. And so, the story you're about to hear unfolds from there. This is not just about revenge, nor is it just about punishing someone for stealing money. It's about standing up for what is right, protecting the people you love, and making sure that betrayal never has the final word. What happened next changed everything. It changed the way I saw my wife. It changed the way my daughter saw her mother. And most of all, it changed the way I approached love, trust, and family. Because sometimes, the people you think you know best turn out to be strangers hiding behind a mask. And when that mask falls, the truth can be devastating. But it can also set you free. The night I found out what my wife had done, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house, while my mind ran through 100 different emotions all at once. Anger, disappointment, sadness, even confusion. But above all, there was one feeling I couldn't shake: betrayal. It's one thing for a stranger to betray you. But when it's someone you love, someone you've built a life with, someone you've trusted for years, it cuts in a way that words can barely describe. I turned my head slightly and looked at my wife, lying there next to me as if nothing had happened. Peaceful, calm, as though she hadn't just shattered the trust of her own daughter. The thought made my stomach turn. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. The next morning, I knew I had to act. I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't let my daughter believe that what happened was acceptable, that her efforts didn't matter. I had to show her that her voice mattered, that her pain mattered, and that justice, at least in our home, would be served. So, I got up early, made breakfast as usual, and tried to keep things normal. My daughter came downstairs, her face still pale, her eyes still carrying the weight of what had happened. She smiled faintly when she saw the food on the table, but I could tell she was hurting inside. My wife walked in a little later, scrolling through her phone as if she hadn't destroyed our daughter's trust the night before. She didn't even look at either of us when she sat down. The tension was thick. You could cut it with a knife. Finally, I put my fork down and looked at her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. She barely glanced up. "About what?" I clenched my jaw. "About the money. About what you did." My daughter froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. My wife sighed dramatically, like she was already tired of the conversation. "I told you, it was just money. Why are we still talking about this?" I stared at her, disbelief flooding through me. "Because it wasn't yours. It was your daughter's. She worked for it. She saved for it. She wanted to do something meaningful with it. And you stole it." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't use that word. I didn't steal anything. I borrowed it. I'll pay her back." "Borrowed?" I laughed bitterly. "You didn't even ask. You didn't tell her. You just took it. That's not borrowing. That's theft, plain and simple." For a moment, silence filled the room. My daughter's eyes darted between us, her face pale. Then, my wife snapped. "You're being dramatic. She's 17. She doesn't need $3,000 sitting around. I used it for the family." "The family?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Don't lie to me. I saw the bag. I saw the receipts. You didn't use it for the family. You used it for yourself." My wife slammed her hand down on the table, startling both of us. I'm her mother. Everything she has is because of me. That money was as much mine as it was hers. And that was the moment something broke inside me. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. No, that money was hers. She earned it, she saved it, and you had no right to touch it. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or realization. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by defiance. She pushed back her chair and stood up. Fine. If you two want to gang up on me, go ahead. But don't expect me to apologize for doing what I had to do. With that, she stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me and my daughter in stunned silence. I turned to look at my daughter. She was trembling, tears pooling in her eyes. "Dad," she whispered. "Does she even love me?" Those words crushed me, because how could I answer them honestly? How could I tell her that a mother's love should never feel conditional, never feel selfish, never feel like this? I pulled her into my arms and held her tight. "Of course she loves you," I said, though my voice cracked with uncertainty. "But what she did was wrong, and I promise you, I won't let it slide." From that moment on, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I started by making a plan to replace the money. I wasn't wealthy, but I had some savings. I decided then and there that I would give her the $3,000 back out of my own pocket, not because money could fix everything, but because I wanted her to know her efforts weren't meaningless. But it wasn't just about the money. This was bigger than that. This was about teaching my daughter the importance of standing up for herself, of knowing her worth, of refusing to let anyone, even family, take advantage of her. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house was tense. My wife avoided us, spending more time out shopping or meeting friends. My daughter kept to herself, burying her nose in books and pretending everything was fine. But I knew better. I knew she was hurting. So one evening, I knocked on her door and asked if I could come in. She nodded. She was sitting on her bed, earbuds in, staring blankly at her phone. I sat beside her and handed her an envelope. She looked at me curiously before opening it. Inside was a stack of cash, exactly $3,000. Her eyes widened. "Dad, what is this?" "It's yours," I said softly. "Every dollar your mother took. I can't undo what happened, but I can make sure you get back what you worked so hard for." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She shook her head. "Dad, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," I interrupted gently. "Because you need to know that your effort matters, your love matters. And no one gets to take that away from you." She threw her arms around me and sobbed into my chest. And in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. But the story didn't end there. You see, actions have consequences. And I wasn't about to let my wife believe she could do something like this and face no accountability. So, I confronted her again a few nights later. This time, I was calm, controlled. I waited until my daughter was in her room. Then I sat across from my wife in the living room. "I replaced the money," I told her. She rolled her eyes. "Of course you did. You always have to play the hero." I ignored the jab. "But this isn't about me. This is about what you did. And I need you to understand something. If you ever betray our daughter like that again, we're done. No second chances." Her face went pale. She tried to argue, but I cut her off. "No. Listen to me. You broke her trust. You broke mine. And the only reason we're still sitting here is because I'm giving you one chance to make it right. Apologize to her. Own up to what you did, and prove that you can change." For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. She just sat there, silent, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Finally, she muttered, "Fine, I'll apologize." But even then, I could tell her words lacked sincerity. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger problem. Because once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. And as much as I wanted to believe we could move forward, a part of me knew things would never be the same. Trust is a fragile thing. Once it's cracked, you can try to glue it back together, but the cracks never truly disappear. You can paint over them, pretend they aren't there. But deep down, you'll always see the lines, always feel the weakness. That's exactly what happened in my home after the confrontation with my wife. For a short while, I thought maybe just maybe we could patch things up. My wife had promised to apologize to our daughter, And though I doubted her sincerity, I wanted to believe she could change. I wanted to believe that, for the sake of our family, she would recognize the gravity of what she had done and take responsibility. But sometimes people don't change. Sometimes they dig deeper into their flaws, clinging to their pride instead of admitting they were wrong. And that's exactly what she did. The day after I gave my daughter the money back, I encouraged my wife to sit down with her, to have an honest conversation. I hoped for an apology, something heartfelt that could begin to mend the wounds. But what happened was the opposite. My daughter later told me that when her mother finally came into her room, she didn't apologize. Instead, she said something along the lines of, "You'll understand when you're older. Life isn't fair, and sometimes parents have to make decisions you won't like." That was it. No remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain she caused. Just a dismissive statement, as if my daughter should simply get over it. When I heard that, I felt my blood boil. How could she twist the situation like that? How could she minimize the betrayal to something as simple as life isn't fair? It wasn't just unfair, it was dishonest, selfish, and cruel. My daughter didn't say much afterward. She just retreated into herself, spending more and more time in her room. I could see the walls going up, brick by brick, between her and her mother. And honestly, I couldn't blame her. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house only grew. Every dinner felt like walking through a minefield. My wife and daughter barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it was curt, forced, and hollow. I tried to mediate, but it was like trying to bandage a wound that refused to heal. One night, I found my daughter sitting on the back porch, staring up at the stars. I joined her quietly, and after a few minutes she whispered, "Dad, I don't think I can ever forgive her. Without House 6 to 4. Without House 6 to Finn." Her words pierced my heart, but I couldn't argue. Forgiveness is earned, not demanded, and my wife had done nothing to earn it. I put my arm around her and said, "You don't have to forgive her right now. Take your time. What matters is that you don't let her actions define your worth. You're stronger than that." She nodded, leaning her head on my shoulder. But the sadness in her eyes told me she was carrying a weight no teenager should have to bear. Meanwhile, my wife acted as though nothing was wrong. She continued her shopping sprees, her outings with friends, her endless excuses. Every time I tried to bring up the issue, she'd brush me off with, "Are we really still talking about that? In this frayed of with discreet blend in fland of like flay. And none of the sayings of where." Yes, we were still talking about that. Because betrayal like this doesn't vanish overnight. The final straw came a few weeks later. I discovered that my wife had not only spent the $3,000 she took from our daughter, but had also racked up significant credit card debt. Thousands of dollars we didn't have. Spent on things we didn't need. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, the list went on. When I confronted her about it, she exploded. "I deserve nice things. Do you know how hard I work around here? Do you know how much I sacrifice?" Sacrifice? The word hit me like a slap. What sacrifice was she talking about? From where I stood, it was my daughter making the sacrifices, working part-time jobs, saving diligently, thinking of others before herself. Meanwhile, my wife drained our resources for her own vanity. That night, after another explosive argument, I realized something had to change. Not just for me, but for my daughter. She needed a safe, stable environment where her hard work and love would be valued, not stolen or dismissed. So, I made a decision, a difficult one, but necessary. I began quietly preparing for separation. I didn't announce it right away. I wanted to be careful, deliberate. I started by organizing my finances, making sure I could support my daughter if things came to that. I reached out to a lawyer, asking about my options. And most importantly, I sat down with my daughter to talk about what might happen. I told her, "Sweetheart, things between your mom and me aren't working. I don't want you to feel like this is your fault, because it's not. But I also don't want you to grow up thinking this kind of behavior is okay. You deserve better." She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but also with a strength I hadn't seen before. "Dad, I just want peace. I'm tired of the fighting. I just want to feel safe." Her words solidified my resolve. The next day, I told my wife I wanted a trial separation. At first, she laughed, thinking I wasn't serious. But when she saw the determination in my eyes, her expression changed. She accused me of overreacting, of being dramatic, of turning our daughter against her. But I didn't back down. "This isn't about drama," I said firmly. "This is about trust. And you broke it." The days that followed were messy, emotional, and exhausting. But through it all, one thing remained clear. My daughter needed me to be strong. She needed to see that when someone betrays you, you don't just roll over and accept it. You stand up, you set boundaries, and you protect yourself. And so, the journey continued. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about values, integrity, and love. About teaching my daughter that while the world may be unfair at times, you don't have to let injustice define you. You can rise above it. You can choose a different path. And that's exactly what I intended to do. Because when you're a parent, your greatest responsibility isn't just to provide food, shelter, or clothing. It's to model the kind of behavior you want your child to carry into their own life. And I wanted my daughter to know without a shadow of a doubt that betrayal might hurt, but it doesn't have to break you. It can make you stronger. When you make the decision to separate from someone you've shared years of your life with, the reality doesn't hit all at once. It comes in waves. One moment you feel empowered, ready to move forward. The next, you feel the crushing weight of uncertainty pressing down on you. But no matter how heavy it felt, I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The conversation with my wife about separation had ended with slammed doors and accusations. She insisted I was poisoning our daughter against her, that I was being unfair and manipulative. But I refused to let those words shake me. I knew the truth. I had seen the truth in my daughter's eyes. In the days that followed, I focused on creating stability for my daughter. I wanted her to feel secure, no matter how chaotic things were between her mother and me. I made sure her routine stayed intact. School, extracurriculars, and her weekend job. I wanted her to feel that despite everything, life could still move forward. But the tension at home was undeniable. My wife alternated between cold silence and explosive anger. One evening, when my daughter wasn't around, she confronted me. "You're destroying this family," she hissed. I took a deep breath. "No. You did that when you took from your own daughter and refused to admit it." Her face twisted with rage. "It was just money, and you've turned it into an excuse to leave me." "It was never just about money," I shot back. "It was about trust. It was about respect. Things you don't seem to understand." "It's on state next today." Her eyes burned with resentment, but I didn't waver. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. My daughter, meanwhile, grew quieter. She was polite with her mother, but the warmth was gone. The little jokes, the hugs, the late-night chats they once had, all of it had vanished. She treated her mother like a distant relative, someone she barely tolerated. And though it hurt me to see their relationship crumble, I knew forcing it would only make things worse. One night, as we sat together in the living room, my daughter turned to me and asked, "Dad, are you really going to leave her?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't want to hurt you, but yes, I think it's the best thing for us. You deserve a home where you feel safe, respected, and valued. Right now, this isn't that home." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I understand. I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I promised. "No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." That conversation solidified something for both of us. She knew she could count on me, and I knew I had to follow through with my decision. A week later, I moved into the guest room. It was a symbolic gesture at first, but it created a physical separation that had been missing. My wife scoffed when she saw me carrying my clothes down the hall. "Pathetic," she muttered under her breath. But I didn't care. From then on, I poured my energy into planning the next steps. I scheduled meetings with my lawyer, quietly began looking at apartments, and worked out a budget that would allow me to provide for my daughter. Every move I made was with her in mind. At the same time, I encouraged her to express her feelings. I told her she didn't have to bottle everything up, that she had every right to feel hurt and betrayed. Slowly, she began opening up more. One night, as we sat together on the porch again, she said, "Dad, I don't think Mom even realizes how much she hurt me. It's like she doesn't care." I sighed, wishing I could disagree. Some people get so caught up in themselves that they can't see the damage they cause. But that doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. They matter. You matter. She leaned against me, silent for a while before whispering, "Thank you for believing me." That simple sentence reminded me why I was doing all of this. She needed at least one parent who stood firmly in her corner, who validated her pain instead of dismissing it. Meanwhile, my wife continued to spiral. She spent more money, often coming home with bags of things we didn't need. When I questioned her, she snapped, "It's my money. I can do what I want." But it wasn't her money. It was our money. Money that was supposed to provide for our family, not fund her shopping addiction. The final breaking point came when I discovered she had emptied one of our joint savings accounts. I had been setting that money aside for our daughter's future college, emergencies, maybe even a car when she turned 18. But when I checked the balance, it was nearly zero. I confronted her immediately. "What did you do with the money?" She rolled her eyes. "I told you. I needed it. Stop acting like I have to justify myself to you." My hands shook with rage. That money was for our daughter's future. "Do you even care about her future?" She smirked. "She'll be fine. You baby her too much." That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no turning back. I called my lawyer the next morning and began the formal process of separation. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but it was necessary. When I told my daughter, she didn't cry. She didn't even look surprised. She just nodded and said, "Good. Maybe now we can finally have peace." Her maturity stunned me. She had been through so much already, yet she carried herself with strength and grace. In the weeks that followed, we prepared for the changes ahead. I found an apartment not far from her school, and we began moving some of her things there. She split her time between the apartment and the house, but it was clear where she felt more comfortable. My wife, on the other hand, continued to play the victim. She told friends and family that I was abandoning her, that I was cruel and heartless. But those who knew the truth didn't buy it. They saw the cracks, the selfishness, the damage she had caused. Through it all, I focused on my daughter, on rebuilding her confidence, showing her that love doesn't mean betrayal, that family doesn't mean exploitation. We went out to dinner together, took long drives, laughed more than we had in months. Slowly, I saw the light return to her eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Because sometimes walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. And in that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing not just for me, but for her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be court dates, financial struggles, and emotional battles. But we would face them together. Because when everything else falls apart, love and integrity are what hold you together. And those were two things I refused to let go of. When you finally make the choice to walk away from a toxic situation, you expect some relief. You expect to feel lighter, as though the weight you've been carrying has finally been lifted. And, in many ways, I did feel that. But with that relief came a new kind of burden. A battle I had to fight not just for myself, but for my daughter. Filing for separation was the first step. It was paperwork, meetings, and more paperwork. My lawyer was kind and patient, guiding me through the process. But it still felt overwhelming. Every page I signed was a reminder that a marriage I once thought would last forever was crumbling before my eyes. The hardest part, though, wasn't the legal jargon or the endless forms. It was the reaction from my wife. When she was served the papers, she acted shocked, as though she hadn't seen this coming. She stormed into the living room, waving the documents in my face. "Are you kidding me? You're really doing this?" I stayed calm. "Yes, I am." She scoffed. "You're pathetic. Running to lawyers because you can't handle a little conflict." "A little conflict?" I snapped. "You stole from our daughter. You drained our savings. You've shown zero remorse. This isn't about conflict. This is about trust, and you broke it." Her face twisted with fury. "You're turning her against me. You've poisoned her mind." I shook my head. "No, you did that all by yourself." That exchange set the tone for the weeks that followed. She fought me at every turn, refusing to cooperate, dragging out the process as long as possible. But I refused to back down. I had made a promise to my daughter that I would protect her, and I intended to keep it. Speaking of my daughter, she was incredible during this time, stronger than I could have ever imagined. She balanced school, work, and the emotional toll of watching her parents split apart. There were nights when she cried, of course, when the weight of it all became too much. But each time, she wiped her tears, squared her shoulders, and kept moving forward. I tried to be her rock, but truthfully, she became mine. One evening, as we sat in our new apartment surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, she said, "Dad, I know this is hard for you too, but I'm proud of you." Her words nearly undid me. Proud of me? I felt like I was failing in 100 different ways. But to her, I wasn't failing. I was fighting, and that meant everything. The legal process dragged on, and as it did, my wife's behavior grew more erratic. She would show up at the apartment unannounced, pounding on the door, demanding to speak to our daughter. Sometimes my daughter refused to answer. Sometimes she did, but the conversations always ended in shouting and tears. It broke my heart to see her go through that, but I also knew it was part of the process. My daughter was learning to set boundaries, to stand up for herself in ways she never had before. And while it was painful, it was also empowering. At one point, my wife tried to claim in court that the $3,000 she took was household money and therefore belonged to both of us. My lawyer dismantled that argument with ease, pointing out that the funds had been earned by our daughter through her own jobs. When the judge asked my wife directly if she had spent the money on personal luxuries, she had no choice but to admit it. The look on her face when the judge scolded her is something I'll never forget. For the first time, someone other than me and my daughter was holding her accountable. But accountability didn't come easily. Even after that hearing, she continued to play the victim, telling anyone who would listen that I was cruel, that I was stealing her family away. Some people believed her. Others knew the truth. Through it all, I clung to one simple truth. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing this to protect my daughter and to teach her a lesson that would serve her for the rest of her life, that no one, not even family, has the right to betray your trust without consequences. There was one particularly powerful moment during this time that I'll never forget. My daughter and I were sitting in the courthouse waiting room, surrounded by other families dealing with their own battles. She looked around at the faces, some angry, some sad, some completely exhausted, and then she turned to me. "Dad," she said softly, "I don't ever want to be in a relationship like this." I swallowed hard. "You won't be. Because you're learning now what it looks like when love is selfish and toxic. And you're learning that you deserve better." She nodded. And in that moment, I realized something important. As painful as all of this was, it was also shaping her future. She was seeing firsthand what happens when boundaries are crossed, when respect is broken, when love turns into control, and she was learning not to accept it. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, progress was made. The court granted me temporary custody, with my daughter spending most of her time with me. My wife was given visitation rights, but my daughter often chose not to use them. She was polite about it, but firm. She told the court she felt safer with me, and they listened. That victory wasn't about winning against my wife. It was about giving my daughter the stability she deserved. At the same time, I continued to rebuild our life. I worked extra hours, tightened the budget, and made sure we had what we needed. It wasn't easy, but every time I saw my daughter smile, it was worth it. There were still rough days, of course. Days when the weight of it all felt crushing. But on those days, I reminded myself of the alternative: staying in a home where trust was non-existent, where betrayal was brushed off as just money. That wasn't the life I wanted for my daughter. That wasn't the example I wanted to set. One night, as we were unpacking the last of the boxes in our apartment, my daughter held up a photo frame. It was a picture of the three of us, taken years ago on a family vacation. She stared at it for a long time before setting it down. "Do you ever miss how it used to be?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "Sometimes," I admitted. But then I remembered that how it used to be wasn't always as good as it looked in pictures. And I realized that what we have now, our honesty, our trust, it's worth more than pretending everything was okay back then. She smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess you're right." That conversation stayed with me, because it reminded me that while we had lost something, we had also gained something far more important: a relationship built on truth. The legal battle wasn't over yet, but we were surviving it together. And in surviving, we were growing stronger. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about who shares your last name or who sits at the same dinner table. Family is about who shows up, who protects you, who values your trust. And I was determined to be that family for my daughter. Courtrooms are cold places, not just in temperature, but in atmosphere. The sterile walls, the stiff benches, the heavy silence, broken only by shuffling papers or the low murmur of voices, it all adds up to a feeling that your life is being dissected under a microscope. That was the reality we faced as the legal battle stretched on. By now, my daughter had become accustomed to walking through those courthouse doors. At 17, she should have been worrying about prom, graduation, and college applications. Instead, she was testifying about stolen money and broken trust. On the day she was scheduled to speak in front of the judge, she was nervous. I could see it in the way she fidgeted with her hands, the way her leg bounced as we sat waiting. I leaned in and whispered, "Just tell the truth. That's all you need to do." She nodded, took a deep breath, and when her name was called, she stood tall. Watching her walk to the front of that courtroom filled me with pride and sorrow all at once. She was so young, yet carrying a burden far heavier than she deserved. When the judge asked her about the money, her voice wavered at first, but then grew steady. She explained how she had worked part-time jobs, saving every dollar she could. She explained that the money wasn't for her, it was meant as a gift for me, something to show her love and gratitude. And then she explained how her mother had taken it all without permission. "She told me it was just money," my daughter said, her voice trembling. "But it wasn't just money to me. It was years of work. It was my way of showing my dad how much I appreciate him, and she took that away from me." The courtroom was silent. Even my wife shifted uncomfortably in her chair. For once, she didn't have a smug smile plastered on her face. The judge asked my daughter how the incident had affected her relationship with her mother. Tears welled in her eyes as she said, "I don't trust her anymore. I don't feel like she cares about me, and that hurts more than losing the money." Those words cut deeper than anything I could have said, because they came straight from the heart of a child who had been betrayed by her own parent. When she stepped down from the stand and returned to her seat beside me, I wrapped my arm around her. "You were amazing," I whispered. She gave me a shaky smile, and in that moment, I knew she had found her voice. But while the courtroom gave her a platform, it also unleashed a new wave of hostility at home. After that hearing, my wife confronted both of us. "How dare you make me look like a monster in front of everyone?" She spat. My daughter stood her ground. "You didn't need any help looking like that. You did it yourself." I nearly choked on my own breath. My daughter had never spoken to her mother like that before, but I also knew it was a line she had every right to draw. My wife's face twisted with rage, but before she could lash out, I stepped between them. "Enough. If you can't take responsibility for your actions, don't you dare take it out on her." That confrontation marked a turning point. My daughter was no longer just a passive participant in this story. She was actively defending herself, setting boundaries, and refusing to be silenced. In the weeks that followed, she grew bolder. She told her mother directly when she didn't want to visit. She refused to accept gifts that were clearly meant as guilt offerings. And she spent more time focusing on her own goals, school, work, and planning for her future. One evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her laptop open. "Dad," she said, "I've been looking at colleges. I think I want to go somewhere far away, somewhere I can have a fresh start." My heart clenched at the thought of her leaving, but I understood. "If that's what you want, I'll support you all the way." She smiled. "I just want to build a life where I don't have to feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time." Her words were simple, but they carried so much weight. And I realized then that this entire ordeal was shaping her into someone stronger, someone who refused to accept less than she deserved. Meanwhile, the court battle continued. My wife tried every tactic she could think of to avoid accountability. She claimed she had intended to pay the money back, that she was under stress, that she was being unfairly villainized. But the more she spoke, the more transparent her excuses became. The judge eventually ruled in my favor on most counts: custody, financial responsibility, and division of assets. My wife was furious, of course, but deep down, I think she knew it was coming. What surprised me most was my daughter's reaction. She wasn't gloating or celebrating. She just sighed in relief. "Finally," she whispered. "Maybe now we can move on." But moving on isn't as simple as a court ruling. The scars remained. My daughter still struggled with the idea of trusting her mother again. And I still struggled with the pain of a marriage that had collapsed under the weight of lies. Yet amid the wreckage, there was growth. My daughter started spending more time with friends, more time working on her college applications, more time rediscovering herself outside the shadow of conflict. She laughed more. She smiled more. And slowly, I saw her becoming the young woman I always knew she could be. One night, as we sat watching a movie together, she turned to me and said, "Dad, thank you for always being on my side." Tears pricked my eyes. "Always," I said. "That will never change." And in that simple exchange, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Because no matter how messy the journey had been, no matter how painful the battles were, we had come out stronger. My daughter had found her voice. I had found my resolve. And together, we had built something that no betrayal could destroy. The road ahead was still uncertain, of course. Life doesn't wrap itself up neatly with a bow. But I knew one thing for sure. We were heading in the right direction. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. By the time the court rulings were finalized, there was a sense of finality in the air. My daughter and I had settled into our new apartment. And though it was smaller than the house we had left behind, it felt warmer, safer, more peaceful. The silence was no longer tense or hostile, it was restful. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people rarely give up control easily. And my wife, well, she wasn't going to let go without one last attempt to twist the narrative. It began with phone calls. At first, she called me, begging for another chance. "We can fix this," she said, her voice dripping with desperation. "We've been through too much to throw it all away." I stayed calm but firm. "It's not about throwing it away. It's about the fact that you broke it, and you've done nothing to repair the damage." Her pleas quickly turned into accusations. "You're weak. You're selfish. You're the reason our family is falling apart." I refused to engage. I had learned by now that arguing with her was like shouting into the wind, pointless and exhausting. When she realized I wouldn't budge, she turned her attention to our daughter. That was when things got truly difficult. My daughter started receiving texts late at night. "I miss you. Don't you miss me? Your dad is filling your head with lies. You're my little girl. You'll always need your mom." At first, my daughter ignored them. But as the messages kept coming, I could see the stress wearing her down. She didn't know how to respond without reopening wounds she wasn't ready to face. One evening, she handed me her phone with tears in her eyes. "Dad, what am I supposed to say to her? I don't want to be mean, but I can't trust her. It's as their next for wines, and a day way." I pulled her close and said, "You don't owe anyone your peace of mind. Not even me. If you don't want to respond, you don't have to. If you do, you set the terms. Boundaries are yours to decide." She nodded slowly, as if those words gave her permission she hadn't realized she needed. The next time her mother texted, my daughter replied with a single message: "I need space. Please respect that." It was short, direct, and powerful. But her mother didn't take it well. The next day, she showed up at our apartment unannounced. She pounded on the door until I opened it. My daughter stood behind me, her face pale but determined. "Why are you doing this?" my wife demanded, her eyes flashing. "Why are you turning her against me?" I kept my voice steady. "She's not against you. She's just protecting herself. You need to respect that." "She's my daughter," she shouted. "I have every right." "No," I cut in. "You had every chance. And you wasted them." For a moment, the fire in her eyes flickered into something else: fear, maybe, or realization. But then her pride returned, and she spat. "You'll regret this." I closed the door on her words, feeling both exhausted and strangely relieved. That night, my daughter looked at me and said, "Dad, I think she's never going to change." I sighed. "Maybe not. But you don't have to wait for her to change to move on with your life." There once-ly, in Sayed. And that's exactly what she did. In the weeks that followed, she threw herself into her future. She applied to colleges, wrote essays late into the night, and talked excitedly about where she might end up. I could see her world expanding, no longer defined by the chaos of our household, but by the possibilities ahead of her. One evening, she came running into the living room, waving an envelope. "Dad, I got accepted." We tore it open together, and sure enough, she had been accepted to one of her top choice schools. The look of pure joy on her face was something I'll never forget. We celebrated with takeout pizza and ice cream, laughing until our stomachs hurt. For the first time in what felt like years, our home was filled with nothing but happiness. But happiness has a way of attracting jealousy. When my wife heard about the acceptance, she tried to insert herself into the celebration. She sent flowers to my daughter's school, signed with a note that said, "From Mom, who always believed in you." My daughter showed me the flowers and rolled her eyes. She didn't even ask what college it was. She doesn't know anything about me anymore. Her words were sharp, but they were also true. My wife wanted credit without putting in the effort, love without accountability, and my daughter was no longer willing to play along. Still, I encouraged her not to hold on to bitterness. Anger will only weigh you down, I told her. Let it go, not for her, but for yourself. She nodded, though I knew it wasn't easy. As the months passed, our lives began to settle into a new rhythm. The court battles were behind us, the apartment felt like home, and my daughter was preparing to step into adulthood with strength and independence. And yet, every so often, my wife would try again. A phone call, a social media post designed to guilt trip, a rumor spread among family members. Each attempt was like a pebble tossed into a pond, creating ripples that disturbed the calm we had fought so hard to build. But each time, my daughter grew stronger. Each time, she reminded herself and me that she had the right to decide who earned a place in her life. One night, she said something that struck me deeply. "Dad, I used to think family meant you had to forgive everything, no matter what. But now I realize family is about who shows up, who respects you, who doesn't make you feel small. And by that definition, you're my family." Those words broke me and healed me all at once. Because in the end, this story was never just about stolen money. It was about betrayal, yes, but also about resilience. It was about a daughter finding her voice, a father standing his ground, and both of us realizing that love is defined not by words, but by actions. And as we stood at the edge of this new chapter, her preparing to leave for college, me learning to live in a smaller, quieter home, we both knew one thing for sure. We had survived the storm, and survival had made us stronger. When my daughter received her acceptance letter, it felt like the first real sign that life was moving forward. After months of chaos, courtrooms, and tears, we finally had something to celebrate that wasn't tainted by conflict. College wasn't just her next chapter, it was our chance to close the book on everything we had endured. The weeks leading up to her departure were bittersweet. Our apartment was filled with the buzz of preparation, packing boxes, shopping trips for dorm supplies, endless checklists. My daughter bounced between excitement and nerves. One moment, she was giddy about the independence she'd soon have, and the next, she was quiet, staring into space, clearly anxious about leaving everything familiar behind. I tried to be her anchor. I reminded her that she was ready, that she had worked for this moment, that she had earned every bit of the joy ahead of her. And truthfully, I needed those reminders just as much as she did. Because while I was proud of her, I was also terrified of letting go. One evening, as we sat surrounded by half-packed boxes, she looked at me and said, "Dad, are you going to be okay when I leave?" The question caught me off guard. I forced a smile. "Of course I'll be okay. I'll just miss you." She tilted her head, studying me. "You've been so strong this whole time. I don't want you to feel lonely." Her words cut straight through me. Because the truth was, I would feel lonely. This apartment that had become our safe haven would suddenly feel too quiet, too empty. But I couldn't let her see that. She needed to go into this next phase of her life with excitement, not guilt. "I'll be fine," I said softly. "My job is to make sure you have everything you need to spread your wings. And when you fly, I'll be cheering for you every step of the way." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo." The day we moved her into her dorm, the campus was alive with energy. Parents hauling boxes, students hugging old friends, laughter echoing down the hallways. We carried her things up 3 flights of stairs, sweating and laughing the whole way. Her roommate arrived shortly after, a bubbly girl with a bright smile, and within minutes, they were chatting like old friends. Watching my daughter laugh, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. She was going to be okay here. When it came time for me to leave, though, the reality hit. We stood in her new room, surrounded by the posters she had already taped to the wall and the string lights she had carefully hung. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I didn't want to let go. But I did, because that's what parents do. As I walked back to my car, my chest ached with both pride and sadness. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process the fact that my little girl wasn't so little anymore. Driving home alone, the apartment felt different. Quieter. Almost hollow. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty spot where her backpack usually sat, and the silence was deafening. But then my phone buzzed. A text from her. Made it through my first meal in the dining hall. Food's terrible, but I'm laughing with my roommate. Don't worry, Dad. I'm okay. I smiled through the tears. She was okay, and that was all that mattered. Of course, peace never lasts forever. A few weeks into her college life, my daughter called me late one night. Her voice was shaky. Dad, Mom showed up here today. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, she showed up? She was outside my dorm. She said she wanted to talk. She kept saying I was ignoring her, that you were keeping me away from her. I told her I didn't want to talk, but she wouldn't leave until security came. I gripped the phone tightly, fury surging through me. Are you okay? Did she hurt you? No, she said quickly. It was just embarrassing. People were staring. I don't know why she won't just leave me alone. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This was her mother's last desperate attempt to cling to control, to force her way back into a life she had broken. But it wasn't going to work. Not anymore. Listen to me, I told her firmly. You don't have to deal with this on your own. I'll call the school tomorrow, make sure they know what's going on. If she shows up again, call security right away. You're not alone in this, okay? Okay, she whispered. Thanks, Dad. The next day, I followed through. I called the university, explained the situation, and they assured me they would keep an eye out. It broke my heart that my daughter had to deal with something like this at all. But I was grateful she had the courage to stand her ground. When I called her later that evening, she sounded calmer. Dad, I think I handled it okay. I wasn't scared, just frustrated. I told her she doesn't get to be in my life unless she changes. And I meant it. Her words filled me with pride. My daughter wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. She was learning to set boundaries, to speak her truth, to protect her peace. Meanwhile, I was adjusting to life on my own. The apartment was quieter without her, but I started to find comfort in the stillness. I threw myself into work, picked up old hobbies I had neglected, and slowly began rebuilding my own identity outside of being a husband or a father. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, I realized something. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not because I didn't miss my daughter, of course I did, but because the constant weight of conflict was gone. There were no more slammed doors, no more tense silences, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And in that freedom, I found hope. Hope that my daughter would build a life filled with love and respect. Hope that I could rediscover parts of myself I had lost. Hope that, despite everything, we could both move forward stronger than before. Of course, my wife wasn't finished. A few weeks later, she filed a motion to challenge custody again, claiming that I had alienated our daughter from her. My lawyer called me with the news, and I felt the familiar weight of anger pressing down on me. But this time, I didn't panic. I didn't crumble, because I knew the truth was on our side. When we went back to court, my daughter, now 18, spoke with clarity and strength. She told the judge that she had made her own choices, that no one had turned her against her mother, and that she was perfectly capable of deciding who she wanted in her life. The judge listened, nodded, and dismissed my wife's motion almost immediately. As we walked out of the courtroom, my daughter turned to me and said, "Dad, I think this is the last time we'll have to deal with this." I hope she was right, because at some point, even the most desperate attempts at control lose their power, and the person they're trying to control learns to stand taller, speak louder, and live freer. And that's exactly who my daughter had become. By the time the second court motion was dismissed, something inside my daughter shifted. It was as if the last chain tying her to her mother's chaos had finally snapped. For the first time in years, she seemed completely free to live her life without the constant shadow of betrayal hanging over her. College became her sanctuary. Every time we talked on the phone, her voice was brighter, more confident. She told me about her classes, her new friends, the late-night study sessions that somehow always turned into laughter. One evening, she FaceTimed me from her dorm room. Behind her, posters covered the walls, books were stacked on the desk, and her roommate was humming along to some pop song. My daughter looked different, older, more assured. "Dad," she said, "I feel like I finally get to be myself here." Those words hit me hard. For so long, she had been walking on eggshells at home, carrying the weight of broken trust. Now, she was finally breathing. I smiled at her through the screen. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to feel free, to feel safe." She grinned. "I do. And I'm learning that I don't have to hold on to people who hurt me. I can let go and still be okay." Her wisdom, at 18, amazed me. I thought back to the little girl who once clung to me at night, asking why her mom didn't care about her feelings. And now here she was, standing tall, her voice steady, her heart strong. Meanwhile, my own life had started to settle. The apartment no longer felt empty. It felt like mine. I picked up cooking again, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. I even started jogging in the mornings, rediscovering the simple joy of fresh air filling my lungs as the sun rose. For the first time in decades, I wasn't living under the weight of someone else's selfishness. And in that freedom, I found parts of myself I thought were gone forever. Still, I missed my daughter fiercely. The silence of the apartment reminded me of her laughter, her late-night chatter, the sound of her footsteps rushing through the door after school. But every time I missed her, I reminded myself that this was good. She was where she belonged, out in the world, building a life on her own terms. Of course, her mother didn't fade quietly. She tried, once again, to reach out, this time through extended family. My daughter's grandparents called her, urging her to be more forgiving, reminding her that family is family. "This my dad is from Go. In like infant days, from our ground." My daughter listened politely, but when she hung up, she called me immediately. "Dad," she said, "I don't think they get it. They think forgiveness means pretending nothing happened. But I can't do that. I can't pretend the trust wasn't broken." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness on their terms. If you choose to forgive one day, it has to come from you, not from guilt or pressure." She sighed with relief. "Thank you. I just needed to hear that." I realized then that part of my role now wasn't just protecting her, it was validating her. She didn't need me to fight her battles anymore. She needed me to remind her that she was allowed to fight them her own way. Months passed, and our relationship only grew stronger. She came home for breaks, filling the apartment with life again. We'd cook together, binge-watch shows, and stay up late talking about everything from her classes to her dreams for the future. One night, she said, "Dad, I want to study psychology. I want to help kids who go through things like I did." My chest swelled with pride. "You'd be incredible at that. You already have the strength and empathy people need." She smiled. "Maybe all of this happened for a reason. Maybe I can turn it into something good." They almost made meaning and now in the Phasruf. And with Phasra Lee, and the Phasra Varsity. Her ability to find meaning in pain humbled me. She wasn't bitter, she was determined. She wanted to take the lessons she had learned and use them to help others. And I knew, without a doubt, she would. As for me, I started reflecting more on my own journey. For so long, I had defined myself by my marriage, by the role of husband and provider. But now, I was learning to define myself in new ways. I realized I enjoyed solitude more than I thought I would. I spent evenings reading, journaling, even trying my hand at painting. I wasn't very good, but the act of creating anything felt liberating. I also realized that I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. The storm had passed, and while the scars remained, they no longer defined me. I was no longer the man who sat silently while his wife dismissed his daughter's pain. I was the man who stood up, who chose truth over comfort, who chose love over fear. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud of myself. But the story wasn't finished yet. One spring afternoon, I got a call from my daughter. She sounded excited. "Dad, guess what?" "What?" I asked, smiling at the sound of her voice. "I've been offered a summer internship at a counseling center. It's exactly what I wanted." I cheered so loudly she laughed. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." Her laughter softened. I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You showed me that even when people hurt you, you don't have to let it break you. You can still grow." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "No, kiddo, you did that yourself. I just walked beside you." That night, after hanging up, I sat quietly in the apartment, thinking about how far we had come. From betrayal and heartbreak to healing and hope. From stolen money to newfound independence. From silence to a strong, unwavering voice. And I realized something important. This story was never just about what was lost. It was about what was gained. We lost trust in someone we thought would never betray us. But we gained resilience, strength, and a bond between father and daughter that no betrayal could destroy. And that bond, that love, was worth more than any amount of money. Life has a strange way of bringing you full circle. Sometimes you don't notice it as it happens, but when you look back, you realize that every step, every heartbreak, every choice has carried you exactly to where you were meant to be. For me, that realization came slowly through quiet nights in my apartment, through long phone calls with my daughter, through watching her step boldly into adulthood after everything we endured. By now, the chaos of our past had begun to fade into memory. My wife, my ex-wife, I should say, had finally stopped her desperate attempts to claw her way back into control. The phone calls ceased, the unexpected visits stopped. Even the occasional rumor whispered through family circles died down. She had moved on, or at least found a new distraction. And in her absence, peace blossomed. But the peace wasn't immediate. Healing is never a straight line. It's not as if one day you wake up and all the pain is gone. No, healing is quieter. It's in the moments you realize you can laugh again without guilt. It's in the mornings when you sip your coffee and the weight on your chest feels a little lighter. It's in the conversations with your daughter where she talks about her future, and you realize she's no longer defined by the betrayal of her mother but by her own strength. That's what this journey had been about all along, not money, not court battles, not winning or losing. It was about finding strength in the midst of brokenness. It was about realizing that betrayal doesn't define you, how you respond to it does. And for my daughter, her response was nothing short of extraordinary. She thrived at college. Each time she came home for a break, she carried herself with more confidence, more independence. She wasn't the anxious 17-year-old saving money in secret anymore. She was a young woman with goals, dreams, and a voice that demanded to be heard. One winter break, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping hot chocolate. Snow fell softly outside the window, and for a moment, it felt like we were in a scene from a movie. "Dad," she said, "do you ever wonder if everything that happened for a reason?" I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" "Well," she continued, "if Mom hadn't done what she did, I might never have realized how strong I could be. I might never have thought about studying psychology or about wanting to help kids who go through the same kind of stuff. Maybe all of it had to happen for me." Her words stunned me. I had spent so much time resenting the betrayal, resenting the pain, resenting the years of silence and mistrust. But here was my daughter, finding purpose in the very thing that had hurt her most. "You're incredible," I said softly. "You know that, right?" She smiled, her cheeks turning pink. "I'm just trying to make something good out of something bad. And isn't that the definition of resilience? Taking the ashes of something broken and building something new." As her college years passed, I noticed how her perspective on family evolved. She didn't shut people out completely. She still talked to her grandparents. She still maintained relationships where they were healthy, but she refused to let anyone guilt her into forgiving what wasn't forgivable. At first, I worried about the weight of that choice. But then I realized she wasn't bitter, she was simply boundaried. And boundaries, I had learned, are not walls. They're gates. They let in the people who respect you and keep out the ones who don't. And she had become an expert gatekeeper. For me, the quiet apartment turned into a canvas for self-discovery. I learned to enjoy cooking again, experimenting with recipes, sometimes failing spectacularly, sometimes surprising myself with a dish that actually turned out delicious. I started reading more novels, biographies, even poetry. I found solace in the words of others who had walked through pain and come out stronger. I also started journaling, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. At first, the words came slowly, awkwardly, but eventually, the pages filled with reflections, with gratitude, with the kind of clarity you only find when you stop running from your past and start facing it. One entry I wrote late one night still stands out to me. Maybe forgiveness isn't about excusing someone else's actions. Maybe it's about freeing yourself from carrying their weight. I can't change what she did, but I can choose not to let it define me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing really is. Reading those words back weeks later, I realized I had crossed a threshold. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I had let go. The biggest lesson I learned, though, was that love isn't proven by grand gestures or empty promises. Love is proven by presence, by showing up, by listening, by staying, even when things are hard. My daughter knew I loved her not because I told her 100 times a day, but because I sat beside her in court when she testified. Because I protected her when the accusations came. Because I encouraged her when the world seemed heavy. Love isn't flashy. It's steady. And steady love is what carried us through the storm. By her final year of college, my daughter was almost unrecognizable from the teenager who once trembled at the thought of disappointing her mother. She was confident, outspoken, compassionate. She landed internships, volunteered at a local youth center, and built a community of friends who supported her. One night, she called me with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Dad, I think I've met someone." I chuckled. "Oh, really?" "Yes," she said, her voice shy but happy. "He's kind, he listens, and he makes me laugh. I feel safe with him." Hearing her describe that sense of safety filled me with joy. Because safety, that was something she hadn't felt for a long time in her childhood. And now, she was building a life where safety was non-negotiable. Graduation day was one of the proudest days of my life. As I watched her walk across that stage, her cap and gown flowing, her smile radiant, I felt tears stream down my face. She had done it. Against all odds, she had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into strength. After the ceremony, she ran into my arms, holding her diploma. "We did it, Dad." I laughed through the tears. "No, kiddo, you did it. You worked for this. You earned it." But she shook her head. "I couldn't have done it without you." Their same way. With theirs sprayed, and maybe that was true. But the truth I held in my heart was this. She had carried herself every step of the way. I had been the steady hand, but she had been the one climbing the mountain. As we celebrated that night, surrounded by her friends, I realized something profound. The stolen $3,000, the thing that had once felt like the center of our story, was nothing compared to what we had gained. We had gained resilience. We had gained independence. We had gained a bond that no betrayal could break. Money comes and goes, but love, trust, and the courage to stand up for yourself, that's priceless. Now, years later, I sit in the same apartment, though it feels different now. My daughter has her own life, her own career, her own future stretched out ahead of her. She still calls me, still visits, still fills the room with laughter when she's home. But she no longer needs me in the way she once did, and that's exactly as it should be. Because my job was never to keep her dependent on me. My job was to raise her to stand on her own. And she's doing just that. Looking back, I don't see this story as one of loss anymore. I see it as a story of transformation. We walked through fire, yes, but we came out refined, stronger, wiser. My ex-wife? She's just a footnote now. A reminder of what happens when selfishness blinds you to the people who love you. My daughter and I, we're the story. We're the proof that love can survive betrayal, that trust can be rebuilt in new ways, that healing is always possible even when it feels impossible. And if there's one message I could share with anyone who listens to this story, it's this. You are stronger than the betrayal you've endured. You are more than the mistakes of others. And you have the power to build a life defined not by what was taken from you, but by what you create out of the ashes. That's what my daughter taught me. That's what I want to pass on to you. Because in the end, this isn't just our story. It's a reminder to anyone who's been hurt, anyone who's been betrayed, anyone who's ever felt like giving up. You can survive. You can rebuild. You can thrive. And sometimes, the very thing that broke you can become the foundation of your greatest strength.